The hotel lobby security footage was deleted 48 hours after the incident. What Officer Dale Pruitt of the Coronado Police Department did not know, could not have known, was that the Marriott on Orange Avenue had installed a second system the previous spring, a silent backup loop that ran to an off-site server and was accessible only to corporate headquarters. That footage showed everything. It showed him grab a man by the collar of his navy dress blues and slam him chest first into a marble check-in desk hard enough to crack the edge. It showed him wrench both arms behind the man's back while screaming, "Stop resisting!" at a man who had not moved. And it showed him walk that man, cuffed, bleeding from the lip, trident pin pressed into his sternum by the weight of Pruitt's knee, toward a back corridor where the cameras ended. What the footage could not show was what happened in that corridor. That, I have to tell you myself. My name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, United States Navy, SEAL Team 3. And what I'm about to describe destroyed 2 careers, ended a 14-year cover-up, and put 4 people in federal court. But none of that happened the night of the incident. That night, I was just a man on the floor who couldn't breathe. Let me go back to the beginning. That September smelled like eucalyptus and jet fuel, the way Coronado always does when you come back from somewhere that smells like nothing good at all. I'd been on rotation for 13 months. The specifics are classified and will remain so. But I will tell you that I came back 15 pounds lighter, with a hairline fracture in my left radius that the field medic had wrapped in electrical tape and prayer, and a particular sensitivity to sudden loud noises that I was already working through with the base psychologist before the readiness evaluation could clear me for reassignment. 13 months is a long time to be gone. Long enough for the world to rearrange itself while your back is turned. Long enough for the people you trusted to make decisions you weren't there to stop. My commanding officer, Captain Raymond Hutchins, had booked the advance team into the Marriott rather than base housing because the enlisted barracks on base were mid-renovation, which was Hutchins's way of saying he wanted his men to sleep in beds that didn't have springs poking through the mattress before they had to sit through 6 hours of psychological evaluation. I appreciated this about Hutchins. He was a practical man who expressed care through logistics. There were 3 of us on the advance team. Chief Petty Officer Deshaun Carter, who had been my dive partner for 7 years and who I trusted with my life in the literal, non-metaphorical sense. Lieutenant Marcus Holloway, known universally as Hall, who was 28 years old, from Tennessee, and who had the peculiar gift of being able to sleep absolutely anywhere, including in the middle seat of a cross-country flight with both armrests occupied, and me. We'd flown commercial from Norfolk because that's sometimes just how it is. You spend months in places where clean water is a negotiation, and then you're in seat 24B watching a woman next to you argue with the flight attendant about her carry-on. The adjustment is always jarring. You learn to sit with it. The Marriott in Coronado sits on Orange Avenue, a block and a half from the water, the kind of hotel that's trying to look like it belongs in a town that doesn't need it. Blonde wood, a lot of glass, a fountain out front that catches the afternoon sea breeze and spits it back at you in a fine mist when you walk past. I remember the smell of the chlorine from the pool drifting over the salt air when I pulled open the lobby door at 6:47 p.m. I remember the particular quality of the light. That golden hour Pacific light coming flat through the west windows and turning the marble floor the color of old honey. A family near the elevators, a father crouched down to a toddler's level, the mother loading a luggage cart, a concierge at the far desk sorting envelopes with the focused unhurry of someone who has nowhere else to be, the soft ambient noise of an air conditioning system and someone's music playing too quietly to identify. Everything ordinary, everything the way it was supposed to be. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. That's something I want to say clearly, because in the months that followed there were people who would try to construct a narrative around my state of mind that night, that I was agitated or aggressive or altered in some way from the deployment. I was tired. That's the entire story of my mental state at 6:47 p.m. on that Thursday. I was 14 hours of travel tired, and I was thinking about the protein shake I was going to make as soon as I got to my room. And whether the hotel gym was any good, and whether I should call my sister back that night or wait until morning when I wouldn't sound like I was made of concrete. Hall stepped up to the check-in desk first. He was already charming the woman at the counter in the easy, uncomplicated way that comes naturally to men who have never had to calculate the risk of being charming. Carter hung back, scrolling his phone. I set my garment bag on the luggage stand next to the desk and looked around the lobby the way I always look around any room I walk into. Not dramatically, not with intent, just the low-level environmental scan that 14 years of training has made as involuntary as blinking. That's when I saw Officer Pruitt. He was standing near the entrance to the lobby, slightly to the right of the main doors, in conversation with the hotel's security guard. A heavy-set man in a dark blazer who I would later learn was named Gerald Park, former Marine, which matters. The conversation between them looked casual. Two uniformed men passing the time. Pruitt's thumbs were hooked in his belt. He was laughing at something. I noticed him the way you notice anything that slightly doesn't fit. A cop in a hotel lobby at dinner time. Not eating, not checking in, just standing and talking with the approximate ease of someone who is performing ease rather than feeling it. I filed it. You file everything. You let the brain sort it in the background while the front of your mind stays occupied with normal things. I did not know he had been watching me since I walked through the door. Hall got his keycards and moved toward the elevator, already on his phone. Carter handled his check-in in 90 seconds flat. Carter is a man of aggressive efficiency in all civilian contexts, probably because everything civilian feels slow after what we do. And then it was my turn. I stepped up to the counter. The woman behind it had dark hair and a name tag that read, Kelsey. She smiled at me with the automatic warmth of good hospitality training and said, "Good evening. Checking in?" "Marcus Webb," I said, and slid my military ID and my orders packet across the marble. She started typing. What happened next took 11 seconds. I know because the corporate server footage was time-coded, and when the attorneys pulled it 18 months later, they went through it, frame by frame. 11 seconds from the moment Pruitt pushed off from the wall to the moment I was face down against the check-in counter with both wrists cuffed behind my back. He came up behind me. I heard the footsteps but processed them as ambient, not directed, a mistake I have dissected approximately 400 times since, and said loudly, "Sir, I need you to step away from the desk." I turned around slowly. I want to be precise about the word slowly, because it matters. I turned the way a man turns when he is in a hotel lobby and has done nothing wrong and is simply confused about why he is being addressed. I turned with my hands visible because I am also a black man in America, and there is a second layer of knowledge that sits underneath all other knowledge, a calculation that runs constantly in the background, and part of that calculation is visible hands, slow movements, calm voice, always, no matter what. "I'm checking in," I said. "Step away from the desk," he said. "Officer, I'm a guest here. My ID and my orders are on the counter." I gestured toward the desk. Kelsey had gone very still, her fingers suspended above the keyboard. In my peripheral vision, I could see Carter 2 steps away, and I could see the exact moment his whole body changed, the shoulders drawing back, the weight shifting to the balls of his feet, the phone going into his pocket. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Pruitt said. His voice had dropped, quieter than before, the kind of quiet that is actually louder than shouting if you know how to read it. "Step away from the desk, now. What is the basis for this stop?" My voice was flat, controlled. I'd been in rooms with worse men than this and kept my voice flat, and I would keep it flat now. He grabbed me by the collar, not the arm, not the shoulder, the back of the collar, the way you grab something you consider an object rather than a person, and he yanked backward with enough force that I stumbled. My hip caught the luggage stand. My garment bag hit the marble floor. He spun me toward the desk and shoved, and the edge of the counter caught me across the sternum with a clean, hard impact that drove every cubic inch of air out of my lungs in a single involuntary compression. My cheek hit the marble surface. His hand was on the back of my neck. "Stop resisting," he said. I was not resisting. My arms were at my sides. My palms were open against the counter. I was being held face down against a hotel check-in desk in dress blues, my trident pressed between my chest and the marble, and the most decorated warfare insignia in the United States military was digging a bruise into my sternum while a man in a Coronado PD uniform twisted my right arm up and back until the shoulder socket sent a white-hot signal up my spine. The cuff clicked onto my right wrist. Carter said, "Hey, hey." He's military. He's active duty United States Navy. You need to... Back up, Pruitt said, not looking at him. Back up, or I will detain you as well. The second cuff. Then his knee in the center of my back, his full weight behind it, pressing me into the desk from behind. I remember the particular sensory detail of the marble against my cheek. Cold and smooth and absolutely indifferent. The way inanimate objects are indifferent, which somehow made it worse. I remember Kelsey making a small, involuntary sound behind the counter. Not quite a gasp. More like a sentence she started and then swallowed. I remember the sound of the fountain outside filtering through the lobby glass. I remember thinking, with a strange, detached clarity, this is being recorded. There are cameras in this lobby. This is being recorded right now. What I did not know, could not have known, was that within 12 minutes of this moment, someone I had never met would be making a phone call that would reach the Pentagon before midnight, and that the reason Pruitt grabbed me had nothing to do with what he told his supervisor later. It had everything to do with a folder of documents I had filed 3 weeks earlier, with a complaint that was supposed to disappear, and with a name on those documents that certain people at the Coronado Police Department had very good reasons to protect. But before I get there, I need to tell you about Commander Stills, because Pruitt didn't walk into that Marriott lobby by accident. He was there because someone sent him, and the person who sent him was standing 40 miles away in a federal building, watching his carefully constructed lie begin to fall apart, and doing what people like him always do when the walls start closing in. He found someone to do his dirty work. Gerald Park was walking toward us from the far end of the lobby. Ex-Marine, as I said. There's a recognition that happens between military men even in civilian clothes. A posture, a directness of movement, and I could see it from the floor. Could see the way Park's eyes read the situation in the 2 seconds it took him to cross the room. The way his face did the specific thing that faces do when what you're seeing doesn't match what's supposed to be happening. "Officer," Park said, in the flattest voice I've ever heard from a civilian, "I need you to look at this man's identification before this goes any further." Pruitt didn't answer him immediately. His knee was still in my back. "He is active duty military," Park said. "His orders are on the counter. I'm asking you formally to review his identification." A pause, long enough that Kelsey behind the counter had pressed the emergency call button, which I learned later, and long enough that 2 guests near the elevator had stopped moving, and long enough that Carter had taken out his own military ID and was holding it up, extended toward Pruitt, the way you hold something out to a man who you are hoping will make a different choice. Pruitt looked at Park, then he looked at Carter. Then he looked at the orders on the counter, close enough to read, close enough to see the SEAL team designation on the header, and he made a decision. He pulled me upright by my cuffed wrists. The shoulder socket made a sound I would rather not describe. The pain was precise and total, a white line from wrist to shoulder blade, and it punched through the controlled flatness I had been maintaining and produced, involuntarily, a short, hard sound through my teeth. Not a cry, just the noise a body makes when something is wrong, and the body is trying to process it faster than language can form. He walked me toward the side corridor. Not the front entrance. Not toward a waiting cruiser. Away from the lobby, away from Carter and Park and Kelsey and the family by the elevator who had all gone completely still, toward the back of the building where the service elevators were, where the carpet changed from the lobby's polished stone to a utilitarian gray runner where the light got worse and the cameras ended. I knew where the cameras ended. I'd clocked them automatically when I walked in, the way I clock everything. 2 domes in the lobby ceiling, one above the check-in desk, one in the corridor leading to the elevator bank, and then nothing beyond the turn. A dead zone. A section of the building the hotel hadn't bothered to wire. Pruitt knew where the cameras ended too. And that told me everything I needed to know about what was about to happen, and nothing I knew prepared me for it anyway. The corridor smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet, that specific combination found in the back passages of hotels that spend their money only on the parts guests are supposed to see. A single fluorescent tube overhead hummed at a frequency just below conscious hearing. Pruitt pushed me through the fire door and it swung shut behind us with a heavy pneumatic click. And then it was just the 2 of us, and the hum of the light and the muffled lobby sounds bleeding through the wall like another world. He shoved me against the concrete. My shoulder took the impact, same socket, and the white line of pain came back hotter this time, radiating down through the elbow. I pressed my forehead against the painted wall and breathed, controlled. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The same breath I use 40 feet underwater when the regulator malfunctions and panic is the one luxury I cannot afford. "You filed a complaint," Pruitt said. His voice was different now, quieter. The performance of authority stripped away, and what was underneath it was something meaner and less confident. The voice of a man who has been told to do something he understands the risk of and is hoping the doing of it will be quick. "You filed a complaint against Commander Richard Stills 3 weeks ago, through the IG office. That complaint is going to go away. You're going to submit a correction saying the information was inaccurate. And then you're going to go wherever they send you next and not come back to Coronado." The fluorescent tube hummed above us. "I understand what you're asking," I said. My voice came out flat against the concrete. "I don't understand why you think I'll do it." He hit me then. Not a punch. A strike with the heel of his palm to the back of my head. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to make the wall come at my face fast. Hard enough that I tasted blood from where my lip caught a concrete ridge. It was a message. The grammar of it was, "This is the beginning of the sentence. The rest depends on you." I turned around slowly, cuffed hands behind me, back against the wall, blood running down my chin. I looked at him. He was not a large man. Medium height, medium build. He had the particular expression of someone who has confused momentum with power, who has gotten this far, and now needs the next move to happen quickly before he reconsiders what he's doing. "You should take those cuffs off," I said. "Excuse me?" "Because in about 4 minutes," I said, "someone is going to come through that door. And when they do, you want to be a cop who made a procedural mistake. Not one who assaulted a senior military officer in a back corridor and held him without cause. You have 4 minutes, maybe 3. The key was that I didn't know if that was true. Carter was outside. Carter had his phone. Whether 3 minutes or 30, I needed Pruitt to believe the clock was running because a man who believes the clock is running makes worse decisions. He took the cuffs off, roughly, snapping the left one with a jerk that rolled my wrist wrong, and then he stepped back and stood there with my blood on his uniform and his career calculus running visibly across his face. "This conversation didn't happen," he said. "No," I said. "It didn't." He left through the far door, the one to the service parking lot, not back to the lobby. I stood in the corridor for 30 seconds that felt much longer, listening to the fluorescent hum and the industrial silence, running my tongue across my split lip and thinking about Commander Richard Stills, who had apparently decided the most sensible response to my complaint was to have me physically intimidated in a hotel corridor by a police officer, which told me, with crystalline clarity, that the complaint had hit something real. Carter came through the lobby door. He took one look at my face and stopped. "You okay?" he said. "Get Hutchins on the phone," I said. "Right now. Let me tell you about Commander Richard Stills, because without him, none of this makes sense." Stills was the senior procurement officer at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, a position with significant administrative power and very little tactical glamour, the kind of role that a certain type of ambitious officer compensates for by exercising that power in ways having nothing to do with military readiness. He had been at Coronado 6 years, well-connected, socially polished, the kind of man who shows up in the right photographs and knows which dinners to attend. He was also, as I had spent 11 months quietly documenting before my last rotation, systematically directing government contracts to a private security firm in which he held a 22% equity stake through a shell company his wife had incorporated in Delaware. I had not gone looking for this. What there was a discrepancy in a logistics report I'd been asked to sign off on. A number slightly wrong in a specific way that military logistics numbers are never slightly wrong in. When I pulled the underlying contracts to reconcile it, I found another number slightly wrong in the same specific way. Then another. And patterns, in my experience, are never accidental. I'd brought it to Master Chief Petty Officer Alan Briggs 6 weeks before my deployment ended. Briggs listened carefully, looked at my documentation, and said he would handle it. I left on deployment. 3 weeks after I returned, Briggs told me the matter had been reviewed and found without merit. When I asked to see the review, He said it wasn't available. When I asked who conducted it, he got very quiet in a way that Briggs, a direct and plain-spoken man under all normal circumstances, had never gotten quiet before. That was the moment I understood he had brought it to Stills before taking it anywhere else. That same afternoon, I drove to the Inspector General's office and filed a formal complaint with 12 pages of supporting documentation, copies of which I had already sent to my attorney, Diane Cho, in San Diego, whom I had retained 6 years earlier and trusted completely. I had also sent a sealed package to my father's house in Oakland, to be opened only if he hadn't heard from me in 30 days. I tell you this because I want you to understand the shape of what I was dealing with. Stills had money, connections, and 6 years of institutional momentum. But I had documentation, and documentation does not care about any of those things. Hutchins arrived at base 40 minutes after Carter's call. He read my written statement standing up, turning the pages slowly, and when he finished, he set it face down on his desk. Stills called the Coronado PD this morning, he said. Told them there was a report of a suspicious individual matching your description near Orange Avenue. You were wheels down at 1100. He made that call at 1300. He had your travel schedule. Briggs gave it to him, I said. Hutchins didn't answer directly, which was an answer. I sat with that for a moment. Alan Briggs, 26 years in the Navy, a man I had eaten meals with and worked beside and relied on in the quiet, undramatic way you rely on people inside the same institution when you believe the institution means something. I thought about his quietness when I asked about the review, how it had felt wrong, and I had told myself I was misreading it. I thought about my documentation finding its way to Stills, which meant Briggs had called him before my complaint was a day old and said, "There's a problem. Here's what it looks like. What do you want me to do?" The ice pack Carter had brought from my shoulder slid off the joint. I caught it before it hit the floor. "What's the play?" I said. "You sleep," Hutchins said. 0600. You're in my office with your full documentation. At 0800, we're on a call with the IG office and JAG. At 1000, I have a call with someone in the Pentagon who has been aware of Stills' contract irregularities since before you filed anything. I looked at him. "Before I filed," I said. 4 months before, he said. And the way he held my gaze said there was a story here much larger than what I had documented. My complaint hadn't been a catalyst. It had been a collision. 2 separate investigations moving toward the same point from different directions. My documentation of the Delaware Shell Company had filled a gap they couldn't close from their end. "They were building a case," I said. "They have a case," Hutchins said. "You found the equity stake." I thought about the logistics report with the slightly wrong number. The first one. The one I'd almost let go. Almost signed off on because I was tired and it was only slightly wrong. "Get some sleep, Webb," Hutchins said and tucked my statement into a folder. "Tomorrow is a long day." I did not sleep. I lay in my bunk in the dark and stared at the overhead, and I thought about Stills sitting somewhere right now, in his house or at a dinner table with his wife, knowing that the corridor play had failed, knowing the footage existed, knowing the Pentagon had a folder with his name on it. I thought about what a man like that does next, whether he escalates or whether he runs. At 4 in the morning, I made coffee in the ground floor mess. Just me and the industrial coffee machine and the sodium hum of the exterior lights through the window. I sat at the table with both hands around the mug, and I finally let myself feel, for the first time since the lobby, the full weight of what had happened to my body. The shoulder, the lip. The split second when my face met the marble and the world went entirely white, and I did not know for one absolute fraction of a moment whether I was going to stand up again or whether this was the kind of thing you don't stand up from. I let myself feel it, the complete shape of it, the weight and the heat and the specific humiliation of being treated as something less than what you are by a man who had been sent specifically to treat you that way. I felt it all the way down to the floor of it. And then I put it down. Not because it didn't matter, because you need both hands for what comes next. At 0600, I was in Hutchins's office with every page of documentation I had. The IG call was at 0800. At 9:47, the investigator, a woman named Patricia Oakes, who spoke in the cadence of someone who processes serious things for a living and maintains composure as a professional tool rather than an emotional suppression, told Hutchins and me that the investigation into Commander Stills had been elevated to a multi-agency review. She used the phrase coordinated federal inquiry and asked if I was willing to provide testimony. Yes, I said. Good, she said. And there was a quality to that single word that sounded less like acknowledgement and more like the sound of a lock turning. The Pentagon call at 1000 involved a man I will not name at a level I will not specify, who told me in 14 words that my complaint had been received, my documentation integrated, and my physical safety was a priority. 14 words. Military efficiency at its most complete. What happened next did not happen fast. None of the things that actually matter happen fast. The federal case against Commander Richard Stills took 11 months to build from complaint to indictment. Alan Briggs, it emerged, had been receiving a monthly payment through a second Delaware LLC connected to Stills's network, a detail I had not known and did not discover until federal investigators subpoenaed his financial records. He took a plea arrangement, surrendered his rank, his pension, and his freedom for 18 months in exchange for cooperation. His cooperation provided investigators with a chain of communications that implicated 2 additional officers who had known about the contracts and said nothing. 2 more careers reduced to paperwork and consequences. Officer Dale Pruitt of the Coronado Police Department was arrested on charges of assault under color of authority and civil rights violation 11 days after the lobby incident. After federal investigators subpoenaed the Marriott's corporate backup server with a court order, the hotel's legal department answered in under 4 hours. The footage was exactly what Gerald Park had described in his witness statement, and exactly what Kelsey described, and exactly what Carter described, and exactly what I described. 5 accounts, every detail consistent, not a single gap between them. Pruitt's attorney tried, because attorneys try, but had no viable line of defense beyond a severity argument, and the judge was not in a lenient mood. Pruitt pled guilty. He received 3 years. Stills went to trial. 9 days. 7 counts of fraud against the government, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of obstruction related to his involvement in directing Pruitt to the hotel that evening. He stood in the courtroom in a suit that cost more than my monthly salary and listened to the verdict with the expression of a man who has known it was coming for a very long time and has spent the interval arranging his face into something that looks like dignity. 8 years. I was in Diane Cho's conference room when I heard, the one with the window that looks over the harbor, where the carriers come in, slow and massive, and look from a distance like something the ocean decided to keep. Her paralegal came in and handed her a phone with a news notification on it, and Diane read it and looked up at me. 8 years, she said. I looked out the window at the harbor for a moment. A gray hull was moving out past the channel buoys, slow and deliberate, going somewhere it would not tell anyone about. That's a start, I said. The case made news the way military misconduct cases make news. Briefly, intensely, then absorbed into the continuous noise of the cycle and forgotten by everyone except the people it happened to. I was offered a commendation. I declined it. Not out of bitterness, and not out of any dramatic principle, but because what I had done was exactly what I was supposed to do, and the commendation felt like being thanked for breathing. I transferred to a new assignment at a different base. The shoulder healed, mostly. There is a particular reaching motion that still catches on cold mornings, a small reminder sitting quietly in the joint that says, "You were there. Remember." Carter called 6 months after the trial. He was in Virginia, about to ship out. The call had the slightly rushed quality of calls made in departure lounges when time is real and finite. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that night, the corridor." "What about it?" "I should have come in sooner." "You came in at exactly the right time," I said. "You sure about that?" "Deshawn?" I said. "You were outside the door the whole time." A pause. Then, "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was." The last time I went back to Coronado, it was a Tuesday in March, the marine layer sitting low over the peninsula the way it does in early spring, soft and gray and smelling of salt and something green. I drove past the Marriott on Orange Avenue without stopping, but I looked at it as I passed, the glass front, the fountain catching the minimal morning light. I thought about the lobby floor that night, honey-colored marble, ambient music, a family by the elevator. Everything ordinary. I thought about Pruitt pushing off from the wall. I thought about the corridor and the fluorescent hum and 4 counts in, 4 counts out, breathing against concrete, while a man tried to make me smaller than I was. I drove past and kept driving, out toward the water, to the place where the road ends and the Pacific begins. I parked and sat for a while. The fog was burning off slowly in the east, a line of sunlight moving across the water like something being gradually revealed. My shoulder caught once on the steering wheel and I shifted my grip and it passed without complaint. There is a specific kind of peace that has nothing to do with things going well. It is the peace of having looked at the worst version of something, the version where the cameras end and no one is watching, and a man with a badge decides what you are worth, and not having broken under it. I looked for a word for this in English for 2 years, and never found one that fit exactly right. What I know is this. The morning of that Tuesday in March was cold, and the fog was burning off, and the Pacific was doing what the Pacific always does, going on forever without comment or apology. And I sat there in my car with both hands on the wheel, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Completely myself. Nothing owed, nothing taken, nothing left that needed to be proved to anyone. I started the engine. I had somewhere to be.